Tabletop Thoughts. My name is David, and today we are going to talk about house rules. There is a couple of house rules that I have used at my own tables, and there's going to be a rule that I haven't used yet, but I would like to add to my next campaign. I suggest before using house rules that if you're new with the system, to run it as written, not to try to change anything until you've played a few sessions with it and you understand how any changes to the rules would impact the game. But if you've played this couple of sessions and you feel comfortable with the rules and the players are agreeable to it, this is where you could add some house rules to spice up the game or to change it a little bit to make it more fun for your table. The two games that have my interest the most right now are Dungeons & Dragons 5e and Shadow Dark. Both of them have rules for critical hits, which are very similar, and neither one of them has anything about critical fumbles.
Critical hits. When you score a critical hit, you get to roll extra dice for the attack's damage against the target. Roll all of the attack's damage dice twice and add them together. Then add any relevant modifiers as normal. To speed up play, you can roll the damage dice at once. Critical hit. You deal a critical hit if you roll a natural 20 on an attack roll or spellcasting check. For a weapon, double its damage dice for the attack. For a spell, you may double one of its numerical effects.
The main reason that I house rule this is because there is very few things as exciting at the table as scoring a critical hit. And it is kind of demoralizing when you watch the player roll 2 1s on the dice, getting the bare minimum damage. So if we take a fighter, for example, who has a +2 modifier to his strength, he would get to roll, using a longsword, 1d8 +2 for damage. So that averages out to 6.5 points of damage per hit. If he would score a critical hit and roll 2 1s on his 2d8s, that would be 4 points of damage, which is actually less than average damage. So, the first option for a house rule is just to maximize the first damage die and then allow the player to roll an extra damage die plus any modifiers. So, for our example with the fighter, he would do 8. That would be the max damage for the first one. Then roll another d8 plus his modifier, which is a +2. There, instead of being a maximum of 10 points of damage, his critical hit could do a minimum of 11, and then the most it could do is 18. So at all points, he is doing more damage than he does on a normal hit. The second option is you could go online and search for a critical hit table. This one is a D100 table that whenever you get a critical hit, you just have the player roll a D100 and look on the chart to see what effect they get. Another option that you could use for critical hits and failures is these cards that I got from Nord Games. There are critical hits for Dungeon Masters, critical hits for players, and critical fails.
Here's an example of one of the critical hit cards for players. In the upper right hand corner, you can see the level of the card. They are set for setback, dangerous, life-threatening, and deadly. There are also 4 different types of damage that you could use with these cards. The top one is slashing, followed by piercing, bludgeoning, and the bottom one is for spells.
I have used these cards in several of my Dungeons & Dragons campaigns that I used to run at a local game club. The players really seem to like them. So you would have, hey, somebody rolls a natural card, somebody grabs the deck, they shuffle it up, they hand it to the player, draws a card, and then he reads it out to everybody. And they were a big hit. So that is something else you might want to look at adding to your game.
If you have a critical hit table, chances are you're going to want a critical fumble table as well. Here's an example of one that I got off the internet. It is from Seth Thorkowski. It is just a basic, roll a D100 and whatever you get shows up here on this table. You could always use the critical fumble cards from Nord Games. Here is an example card. The 4 levels of failure are awkward, embarrassing, shameful, and disgraceful. The 4 different attack types on these cards are melee on top, followed by range, animal, which would count for like claws and bites, and the final one is spells.
Another house rule you may think of adding to your game is keeping death saves secret. This is easier to do in like an online game, but we can do this on as a in-person game as well. I have done this in a couple of my campaigns, and it adds a little more attention to the table since the other players can't see how good or badly the unconscious player is rolling. Because if it's open, you might have players that, they roll a good death save, they roll another one, so nobody's really in a rush to go save them because the chances of them dying is really low at that point. If the players don't know how good or bad they've rolled, they usually have to leave combat or start strategizing among themselves on how they're going to get to the player to, stabilize them before they die. Online, you can easily do it. We used to use Roll20, so you can do whispers to the GM. So I would just have the players roll their death saves as a whisper. That way I would see it and they would see it, but none of the other players would know it. If you're doing this at your table, what you can do is have the player, roll their death save like kind of in secret, and then they can either write it on a piece of paper and pass it to the DM, or they can just keep track themselves, because as the dungeon master, you really don't need to, it's nice to know, but as long as they're rolling it and you trust them that they're not going to just cheat, they can roll it and just keep track of it themselves. Another house rule that I have used at my table is taking potions as a bonus action. I've seen other tables doing this as well as, and I've also seen online games that use it as a bonus action. It's kind of nice. Now, if you're administering a potion to another player, that requires an action. But if you're just taking it yourself, it's kind of nice just to use it as a bonus action, because it really is not fun for you to be low on hit points. So you take your action to drink a healing potion. On the enemy's turn, he hits you again, pretty much wiping out the action that you just took, and you really are in the same spot you were, and you just wasted your time. So allowing it as a bonus action, you can still like hit or try to disengage or try to get away and still heal up a little bit. I normally allow this because it's not much more powerful than saying like a healing word in that, which is a bonus action, and that heals just a little bit of points. So taking a potion is about the same. Speaking of healing potions as a house rule, something that I've seen the Dungeon Dudes doing, I will put a link to their channel in the description below, is maximum hit points back from a healing potion. This is nice because, especially if the table's small and you don't have a dedicated healer, somebody who can heal consistently, you spend money to get this healing potion, which aren't cheap, and then you really need it and you roll and you get like 4 points back. Sometimes it's just not enough, especially if you don't have ready access to it. So allowing the players to just take maximum hit points you get from a potion, that was a good idea, and I'm stealing it. So that's another house rule that you could add to your game.
Another house rule that I use, especially if the table is smaller, is allowing followers to be part of the party. What I do is give one player, or hopefully all the players, a follower that they can use to be part of the party. During combat, you allow the players to run them, but during all the role-playing sessions or in between, you, as the dungeon master, actually run their personality and control them. Here's an example from Strongholds and Followers. This is the Cavalier. As you can see, it is a condensed, easy-to-run sheet that the players can use to control their character when they are in combat.
The last house rule that I have is one that I actually haven't got to use yet, but is something I want to incorporate in my next game, I believe. And that is weapon quality. This was something I believe I saw on Bob World Builder, and it would be another way of adding, not magical weapons, although, there are magical weapons in the games, but it would be a way of showing off different qualities. So instead of just having a long sword, you could have a long sword that is, I'll show a table here on the screen. So there's different levels. So it goes everything from a mastercraft down to ruined. As you can see, ruined is pretty much a defective weapon. This would be something that you find that's all rusty and broken and that, but you could pick up and use. Say you escape from prison, you're in a goblin cave, and they are known to have poor weapons. You pick up a rusty short sword, well, it might have the ruined or the faulty quality tier. So it rolls damage with disadvantage because it's a defective weapon, but you have something. You see standard is just a normal sword or whatever you would buy from a blacksmith. But then you have levels like sturdy and mastercraft. So this would be where you would have weapons that were, say, like dwarven made or elven made, something that you could tell the players like, hey, you found an elven longsword. It's not just a standard longsword just because it has some maybe elven roots or it's like a little curvier. It would be, you get to roll weapon damage with advantage if you have a mastercraft weapon. So it's something that the players would want to get, but at that point, it's still not like a magical weapon. It's just a really nicely made sword. So you do get an advantage for that. But yet, it's not the whole way up to being a magical weapon. So if you're playing in a game that has fewer magical items, like it's really just a low fantasy type of game, you would still have a way of giving your players something that's a little nicer. Maybe it costs a little bit more to have made and stuff like that. But it's something that they would want to get, so it'd give them something to spend their money on. And it gives them a real advantage in combat, but it is not like a magical weapon.
Are there any house rules that you use that I did not include? If so, please leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, check out the next video right here. It's packed with more great content. And as always, keep on gaming.